Welcome back. Our topic today is going to be mechanical fastening systems. And the nature of our work often requires us to make choices that are driven by practical or functional needs that we may well want to hide or be invisible to our viewers or to our audience. It may also happen to be that you want to find ways to make attachments or mechanical connections between parts that are explicit and an important part of the aesthetic of your work. So much of what you might need can be readily purchased out in the world. Some of what you might need may need to be modified in some way to make the appearance more consistent with your aesthetic, or the length or scale of it may need to be adjusted or manipulated in some way to meet your needs. And some of what you may need might be hardware or mechanical fastening systems that we make out of raw materials. So to succeed at this, there's a few things that we need to know. We need to start to develop an understanding of what's available out there. So that becomes part of our sort of library of information that we can draw on. We need to start to understand the basic mechanical functions of these things. And it is really useful if we know how to describe these things or identify these things in written form, so that either when we go into a hardware store, we know what it is that we want to ask for, and or it's easier to find if we're making purchases online or shopping through catalogs. So what we're going to look at over the course of this lecture series is fasteners, hardware, hanging systems, brackets, struts, and all kinds of different mechanical systems that are used for holding, moving, mounting, rolling, joining, or coupling things together. So a few examples of things that are working behind the scenes and that are discrete utilization or manipulation of hardware would be things like keyhole hangers. So keyhole hangers are sometimes also referred to as blind hangers, and those can be mounted on the back of flat worker objects below the surface of the material, so that you're able to then take that object and hang it off of a wall surface like this, so that it mounts flush to that surface. Right? So that's a good example of something that's working behind the scenes for us. Or it may well be an explicit expression that is, again, part of the important aesthetics of that object. And I think this is kind of a good example of that at work, where we're taking this metal component that was fabricated, and we're taking this rubber block that was manufactured, and we're using nut and bolt to fasten or connect those things together, and then we're manipulating the surface of those materials so it's aesthetically consistent with our object. And in some cases, we may be taking advantage of mechanical systems like plumbing fittings that allowed me to be able to weld what's called a nipple or a coupling on the inside of this object, which is a inflated form, and then to be able to use a plug or cap on the end of that to seal it. So there's a good combination of where we're taking advantage of both the mechanical characteristics of it, and again, it's something we're able to manipulate to make aesthetically consistent with that object that we're working on. And then here we have an example of where we're using hardware to combine dissimilar materials and to connect parts or pieces that we fabricated to hold those together in a way that is mechanically sound and aesthetically consistent with those objects. So here you can see a brass rod we formed mechanical threads or machine threads on the end of this brass rod to kind of do that work for us. And then there are some cases where we might be manufacturing our own hardware, like this butterfly plate that was cut out of 1/8" steel plate and then countersunk to accommodate these flat head slot drive wood screws, and then again treated in such a way that it's aesthetically consistent with the rest of the object. So a lot of things to go over. We're going to break this down into a series of smaller modules and demonstrate how those materials are used. Start to familiarize yourself with some of the language that's used to describe the dimensions and the drive systems that are used for installing or deinstalling those mechanical fasteners. And we're going to talk about things like the job that things like washers and lock washers do for distributing load over more surface area and then holding those parts and pieces securely in place. We're going to look at anchoring systems that are used for both hollow walls and for mounting in cementous materials like concrete block and cast cement. And so thanks so much for taking the time to participate, and I look forward to sharing some of what I know about these things with you in the near future.